Hey, what's going on, guys? My name is KarQ, and if you're watching this video, that means the Overwatch 2 beta is currently live, and there's a lot of hero balance patch changes we have to go through. Remember, you can get Overwatch 2 beta key drops at my stream at twitch.tv/KarQ, link down below, for 1 day only, very limited. You need to watch 4 hours of the stream on Wednesday, April 27th, beginning at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, and whatever that converts to their time zones. Be there. You don't want to miss it. More info down below. Let's get to the hero balance changes. Let's go. For D.Va, her total health increased from 600 to 650, however the distribution has changed. Her base health increased from 300 to 450, but her armor reduced from 300 to 200. Her primary fire movement speed penalty has been reduced from 50% to 40%, which is a buff. That means she moves faster. Her weapon spread has also reduced from 4 to 3.5 degrees. That's a buff as well. Tighter weapon spread means better accuracy. Doomfist is now a tank. His health has increased from 250 to 450. Hand Cannon, his primary fire, had its damage reduced from 6 to 5 per pellet. However, the ammo regeneration is increased from once every 0.65 seconds to every 0.4 seconds. That's a buff. Rocket Punch had its impact damage reduced from 50 to 100 to 50 to 30. The wall impact damage was reduced from 50 to 150 to 20 to 40. Maximum charge time was reduced from 1.4 to 1 second, which is actually a nice buff. And he can multi-punch multiple targets now. Uppercut has been removed and has been replaced with Power Block. Doomfist now enters a blocking stance, reducing damage taken from the front by 90%, and blocking 100 damage now causes Doom's gauntlet to be supercharged. This empowers the next Rocket Punch to deal 50% increased damage, travel 50% faster and further. The radius of the multi-targeted punch is twice as large, and targets that hit the wall are stunned for an additional 0.5 to 1 second depending on the charge amount. In Overwatch 1, Seismic Slam had 2 behaviors. If you use it on flat ground, it goes straight. If you do it over a ledge, you can do a slower arcing one. In Overwatch 2, Seismic changes depending on where you're aiming it. So you can go horizontal if you're aiming straight, or go really vertical if you're aiming high. It also now creates a large shockwave upon landing, dealing 50 flat damage, slowing enemy movement speed by 30%, and no longer pulls enemies in. Seismic Slam can also now be cancelled when pressing the ability key again, allowing you to carry your momentum. Meteor Strike has had its cast time reduced from 1 to 0.5 seconds, so you'll notice that it activates much quicker now. The outer ring damage range has been reduced from 15 to 200 to 15 to 100. The small inner ring of Doom's ult is still at 300 damage and remains unchanged. The knockback effect has been removed in Overwatch 2, but it now slows the move speed of enemies hit by 50% for 2 seconds as an added effect. Orisa's health has increased from 450 to 500, getting an additional 50 base health. Her primary fire has a name change from Fusion Driver to Augmented Fusion Driver, in which she now fires 10 plasma projectiles per second that start out large and shrink as they travel. The damage starts at 10.5 and then scales down to 4 damage over 35 meters distance. It also now uses a heat mechanic instead of ammo. Firing the weapon increases heat and cools down when not firing, so if you overheat, you'll actually be locked out for 3 seconds. Fortify still exists, but with some big changes. First, Orisa's movement speed is 20% slower while active, so that's a nerf, but the duration has increased from 4 to 4.5 seconds. It now provides 125 extra over health instantly while active. It reduces the heat generated by Orisa's weapon by 50%, and it still has its old properties of 40% damage reduction, you can't be CC'd, and you can't be headshot. It's a very loaded ability. Now let's get to her new abilities. First, her Energy Javelin, which is her new secondary fire. It deals 80 damage, stuns for 0.2 seconds, and knocks them back 6 meters. If the enemy collides with a wall while being knocked back, they take 40 more damage and are stunned for an additional 0.3 seconds. Javelin Spin acts like a D.Va Matrix or Sigma Suck, where you can now spin your spear for 1.75 seconds and destroy incoming projectiles, including ultimates. It increases your forward movement speed by 60% while active and by 20% for 2 seconds after the spinning ends. It rapidly deals damage to enemies in her path, up to 90 total damage while constantly knocking them back. Terra Surge is now her ultimate that immediately pulls enemies in and charges up an AoE attack over 4 seconds. Releasing it deals up to 225 damage based on how long it was channeled. Orisa also gets the effect of Fortify, and it slowly deals minor damage over time, slowing nearby enemies' movement speed by 30%. Reinhardt's health is increased from 500 to 650, gaining an additional 50 base health from 300 to 350, while armor gets a huge plus 100 from 200 to 300. His passive, Steadfast, has been removed since he now gets the tank roll passive that grants 30% knockback resistance and 30% lower ult generation from damage taken and healing taken. His barrier field shield health has been reduced from 1600 to 1200, and its regen rate has been reduced from 200 to 144 health per second. His charge has been buffed with a 50% increase in its steering turn rate, and it can now be cancelled. The damage has been nerfed from 300 to 225 however, but its cooldown has been decreased from 10 to 8 seconds. Fire Strike now has 2 charges, which is huge. Damage has been slightly nerfed though from 100 to 90. Roadhog did not receive much in Overwatch 2. His base health increased from 600 to 700, and his Take a Breather healing increased from 300 to 350. That's it. For Sigma, his base shield health has increased. Accretion's damage also increased from 70 to 100, which is huge because it allows you to one-shot 200 HP heroes now. His experimental barrier regen has been nerfed though, from 120 to 100 per second. For Winston, his base armor increased plus 50 from 150 to 200, giving him 550 total health. He has a brand new secondary fire where you charge it to fire a 30-meter range jolt of electricity, which deals 50 damage and costs 20 ammo. His bubble health is increased from 700 to 800, and it even came with a reduction in its cooldown from 13 to 12. However, its duration was reduced from 9 to 8 seconds. Primal Rage cost also increased by 10%, which is a nerf I find a little odd considering how much slower it is to build in Overwatch 2 with less people to zap, but it is what it is. For Ball, he's gained 100 extra HP total, plus 50 more base armor from 100 to 150, and plus 50 more base health from 500 to 550. Adaptive Shield received a buff with a huge range increase from 8 to 10 meters, and health gain per nearby target from 75 to 100. I think he's going to be pretty good in Overwatch 2. For Zarya, her base health has increased from 200 to 250, base shields from 200 to 225, netting her 75 more total HP, sitting at 475 now. Her particle barrier, which is her self bubble, now has a 10-second cooldown on a shared 2-charge system with her projected barrier. Both abilities' cooldowns now begin upon usage instead of when the barrier expires, which is a huge net buff. For her projected barrier specifically though, the same target cannot be bubbled again for 2 seconds. Zarya's energy passive was nerfed where its decay rate has increased from 1.8 to 2.2 per second. For Ashe, nothing changed except Bob, who had his health reduced from 1200 to 1000. Bastion received a complete rework. First, he lost his Ironclad passive. His configuration recon, the default mode, had its weapon damage increased from 20 to 25 per bullet, along with his weapon spread completely removed from 1.2 degrees to 0 degrees. However, the fire rate has also been reduced from 8 to 5 shots per second, along with his ammo down from 35 to 25 to compensate. His configuration Sentry form has been renamed to configuration Assault, aka his turret form. He's now mobile, but it's a bit slower at about 35% of his base movement speed. It lasts 6 seconds and it goes on a 12-second cooldown afterwards. While firing, he has infinite ammo, a constant weapon spread of 2 degrees, and each bullet deals 12 damage. Bastion no longer has self-repair. It's now called the A36 Tactical Grenade, and this launches a grenade that can bounce off walls and can stick onto enemies, dealing up to 130 damage after a short delay. You can also do some fun rocket jumps with it. Bastion's ultimate is now called Artillery, where he no longer goes into tank form and instead is locked into place and fires up to 3 long-range artillery shells that deal above 200 damage. And yes, they work indoors as well. Cassidy's changes first begin with his Fan the Hammer, as its fire rate has been increased by about 7.5%. Biggest change is Flashbang though, as it has been removed. Blizzard wanted less CC in the game, and this ability is now replaced with Magnetic Grenade. You throw a magnetic grenade which sticks onto enemies and automatically homes in on them and chases them if they're close by. It deals 131 damage, split between the 1 impact damage, 65 for the explosion, and 65 more to the stuck target at the time of detonation. His Deadeye now grants damage reduction while channeling it, which is nice. The damage ramp up also seems to have been reduced quite a bit. If you look at the numbers on the screen there, it just seems like the goal was to tone down the damage ramp up because of the increased tankiness. And the duration of Deadeye is now increased from 6 to 7 seconds, but its cost is 10% more. Echo received a few changes. First, the focusing beam max DPS has been reduced from 200 to 175. Duplicate has been nerfed as well, where the total HP of a copy target can no longer exceed 300 HP. This only affects tanks and makes it so duplicating a tank is no longer a top priority like it was in Overwatch 1. Genji received no changes. And Hanzo had his storm arrow damage reduced from 70 to 65. That's it. Shimada Brothers didn't get much love. For Junkrat, his steel trap CC has been changed quite a bit. First, it no longer prevents all movement, and instead just slows enemies by 65% until they reach the max chain length and then just breaks. It still prevents movement abilities from being activated though. Its damage has also increased from 80 to 100, and the speed of throwing the trap increased from 10 meters to 17 meters per second. All of these extra buffs to compensate for the lack of the CC. For Mei, her primary fire no longer freeze stuns people. Instead, it now just slows targets by a fixed 50% instead of building up over time. The slowing duration itself has been reduced from 1 to 0.5 seconds, but the damage has significantly increased from 55 to 100 DPS, and her ammo has increased from 120 to 150. For Cryo Freeze, it no longer removes the gravitic effects of Zarya and Sigma's ult, which is quite a big nerf. Ice Wall has also been nerfed, with individual pillar health reduced from 400 to 250, and the max range of walling reduced from 35 to 20. Finally, her ultimate has actually increased in cost by 15%, so it'll be very slow to build. Surprise, surprise, Pharah received no changes actually. Moving on. Reaper was considered really strong in the closed alpha, so I'm not surprised to see some nerfs to his shotgun, with the damage per pellet reduced from 6 to 5.4 and its spread increased from 6 to 8 degrees. A wider spread is a nerf because you're going to be more inaccurate. Reaper was also affected by the global phase change mechanic, which I thought I would note here as he also cannot escape Zarya's grav or Sigma's flux anymore. Sojourn is a brand new hero in Overwatch 2, so I'll just quickly showcase what she does. You can watch plenty of other in-depth Sojourn guides on YouTube, but for the sake of time, let's start with her railgun up first, which fires projectiles that generate energy on hit, as you can see in the center of the screen. Her secondary fire is a high impact shot that consumes the stored energy, and is hit scan that deals 130 damage at max charge. So primary fire projectile, secondary fire hit scan. Disruptor shot is a large energy burst that just deals a lot of damage, but enemies can and probably will just walk out of it. It's sort of like Torb's ult, if you will, except less messy and sticky. Power Slide is just a ground slide that can cancel into a high jump, and her ultimate is called Overclock, which automatically charges her railgun for her, in which you can fire about 6 shots before it expires. Soldier has received no changes. He's also really good based on my alpha testing last month, so go off, Kings. Sombra received a major rework. Let's start with her machine pistol weapon, which had its damage reduced from 8 to 7, but its spread is 10% tighter now. Her hack received a ton of changes. Look at this list. First, the cooldown was reduced from 8 to 4 seconds. The cooldown is also no longer reduced when hacking health packs. Cast time is increased from 0.65 to 0.85 seconds. Health pack hack duration is reduced from 60 to 30 seconds. And the ability lockout of the hack duration has been reduced from 5 to 1 second. This is the big one, as it acts more of an interrupt now, rather than an annoying 5-second silence. Being hacked also now reveals you through walls for Sombra's team for 8 seconds, and interrupting her hack also makes her incur the full cooldown. Disabling Bob went from 5 seconds to 2 seconds, much shorter, and now also destroys Bap's immortality field. Her passive, Opportunist, now allows her to deal 40% increased damage to hack targets, which is huge for her assassination potential on Zen, for example. Her Invis button has a quicker fade-in time by 50%, and the invisibility detection radius has increased from 2 to 4 meters, meaning you'll bump into enemies more frequently. However, she can also now hack while in stealth, but is temporarily revealed during the hack animation and for a brief 0.75 seconds after the hacking. That's a huge buff. EMP has also been significantly changed. It still does what it used to do, but it no longer deals damage to shield health pools and instead now deals 40% of the current health of all enemies. Symmetra received no changes, and Torb also received no changes. Interesting for these guys. Tracer has received a nerf, 1 bullet damage from 6 to 5. It's actually pretty significant in my opinion, as it definitely affects her 1 clipping potential. And Widowmaker received a minor buff, returning her 175 HP back to 200, which helps her survive the dive meta. Besides Ana's really nice gunshot sounds, her cooldown of Sleep Dart increased from 12 to 15 seconds, being one of the last few CC abilities in the game. For Baptiste, his primary fire minimum fall-off range has been reduced from 25 to 20 meters. That's a nerf. In translation, that just means his weapon damage starts scaling down at closer ranges. His regen burst did get compensated though, having its total healing increase from 75 to 100 for allies. Brig was always annoying to deal with in Overwatch 1 with her CC, so now they removed the stun from her shield bash, but to compensate, they reduced the cooldown from 7 to 5 seconds. The distance traveled is also increased from 7 to 12 meters, so you go super far. Her movement speed is no longer stopped when impacting barriers, so you can go through them. Its damage has been increased from 1 to 50, and it also triggers her passive Inspire. All those buffs for 1 stun nerf. Brig's still pretty good if you ask me. Lucio only had his ultimate cost reduced by 12%. Nothing else. Mercy's original passive conflicted with the support role passive, so it now increases the role passive healing by 50%. And as of beta 1, the support role passive is 15 HP per second, meaning Mercy now heals 22.5 HP per second after not taking any damage for 1 second. Moira didn't receive any direct changes, but was indirectly affected by the phase changes where she also cannot fade out of Sigma's ult or Zarya's grab. And for the last hero Zen, no change, baby. If you made it to the end, thank you very much. I'm probably live right now, and if I'm not, make sure you're tuning in on Wednesday, April 27th, 2022 at 10 a.m. Pacific Time, 1 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. UTC, because that is how you get the Overwatch 2 beta drops. Okay, see you there. Link in the description. Boom.